Good morning, everybody. Hey, my name's Azalia, and it is awesome to be able to be here with you this morning because I'm excited about what I'm sharing about. I'm sharing something that I think is so valuable in not only our world today, in our community, but especially right here in our church. Okay, so we're in this series you've heard, Who Do You Say I Am? But we didn't just come up with this title or think of it just because. There's actually a whole story behind why we're calling this series Who Do You Say I Am? So I'm going to share that with you. And it comes from a place that's recorded in the Bible where Jesus was just chatting with his disciples, okay? And his disciples were his followers, a bunch of people that he followed closely with. There was 12 of them, and they followed him, and they learned from him and his teachings, okay? And so he's with these guys, and he just retreats to a place, and he says to them, hey, let's just take a little bit of a break. Let's go and spend some time praying. They've been with crowds of people that actually just come from feeding the 5,000 people, so lots was going on. And he gets them all together, and he says, hey, you know, in the crowds and out on the streets and in our neighboring area, people are just saying, like, that I'm this person or I'm that, or they're saying this about me, but I just want to know from you guys, from my friends, who do you say I am? And I think at that moment when he called his friends together and asked that, that's a pretty confronting question, and I can imagine that they would have been a bit anxious to share, like, you go first, no, you go first, in case they get it wrong. But it wasn't like that at all. And that question, who do you say I am, is one that we think is probably the most significant question you could ask yourself about God and your faith journey. And that's why we're going to be in this series exploring and unpacking together who do we say God is to us personally. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be unpacking different character qualities of God and find out just exactly who he was, but not only that, who he is to us personally. If you went out onto the street and we just asked a bunch of people in our culture and society today, who do you say Jesus is? We would get such a wide range of answers, right? We'd get from this end of the scale where someone would say, oh, that guy, he's just a lunatic. He's completely made up. He was just a liar. Some might say, I think he was just a historical figure in the past. Some would go the next step and they would say something like, oh yeah, he was a philosopher, or maybe he was like a life coach kind of guy. Some would be, I don't really know, I'm not sure. I think he was just famous. And some might even say that he didn't exist at all, or to this extreme where they'd say, I know him, he's my Lord and Savior personally. So wherever you sit on that question, if you ask it to yourself today, we hope that by the end of this series, you'll know him personally yourself to be able to respond with confidence to who Jesus is and who he is to you personally. So I want to start by asking a question. Not the who do you say he is question, but another one. Did any of you have a nickname growing up? Yeah? Or maybe you still have a nickname today. Some of the nicknames can be quite funny and there's cool backstories to them. I had a bunch of nicknames growing up. They weren't really from humorous reasons. They were just like shortened variations of my name, because my name is like complicated, right? So it's Azalia, which is quite long in itself. And then my parents just went extra mean and called me Sawani for a second name. So it's like, what? So this is why I needed nicknames, okay? So I had the name Izzy. And how does Izzy come out of Azalia, you ask? It's because they thought it was Azalia, so they shortened it to Izzy in my soccer team. And then in my high school, I got the name Zalou. So all my friends actually still call me Zalou today, which is, I don't really love it, but it sticks. And then obviously a lot of you here call me Zals as well, and that's also just a shorter version of Azalia. And then my parents, they gave me the name Sweet Pea. Isn't that cute? Right? It still sticks. Except now, 30-something years later, my parents sort of naturally just split the name. So my dad often calls me Sweet, which is great, but my mum just calls me Pea. And I often feel needs a little bit of an explanation in public. But yeah, that's what she calls out, and I'll respond. And I'm sure you can think of some nicknames for yourself. And nicknames often get given to us by the way people perceive us, right? So there's a lot of famous sports players, singers, things like that, where they will get given a name that we might know. And these are things like Air Jordan, because he always got air when playing basketball, right? The King of Rock, the Iron Cowboy, Miss America, Queen Bee, or even New Zealand's favourite, the Mad Butcher. But Jesus actually had a nickname too. He had loads of names, as Cullum read and you heard before. There's so many names that we can refer to him as. But not all these nicknames were actually so powerful and glamorous as they should be for someone with such holiness and authority and of his position. But he was given the nickname a friend of sinners. This was a label given to him, and it was a title branded on him, like a nickname that was supposed to be one full of shame, that it was like an insult to give to him. But Jesus, he took that name and he took it as a sign of success, not shame at all. And why on earth did he do that? He did that because he said time and time again, and you only need to read a little bit of the New Testament to actually see what Jesus' whole purpose and mission was. And it was that he came to seek and save the lost. He says, I came for the sick, not the healthy. I came for the sinners. I came for the everyday, ordinary people like you and me, right? And he came to give us, to free us. He came to give us forgiveness, and he actually came to give us friendship with him as well. So this is how we know Jesus got labeled friend of sinners. But if we think of it, first of all, we need to know what is a good friend, right? We might all have different variations of kind of what we think is expected of a friend. But I know that all of us could agree on a few words, right? We would say honesty, loyalty, would say someone who accepts us as we are, would say someone who's generous and kind, who shows up when we need them, they're reliable. We'd all agree on these kind of things. This is one of the character qualities that Jesus has, that when you say, who is Jesus, we know that he was and is a good friend, not just to sinners, but to everybody. If you look in the New Testament, you can see he's a friend to Martha, he's a friend to Lazarus, he's a friend to Peter and the rest of the disciples, the people he hung out with. But then you can also see he hung out with different people and called them friends too. There was Zacchaeus, who was like this crook tax collector guy who sort of cheated people on their money and no one really liked him. Then there was Mary, and she was a prostitute. And what was he doing hanging out with a prostitute? There was the leper who was sick, and Jesus actually touched him. There was kids who were just a nuisance and in the way, but Jesus actually called them and said, come to me, and spent time with them. There was his friends of the lower class, like people in the, the slave sort of jobs, and not even just that, but ordinary people who smelt like fish and were covered in sawdust and had bruises from making tents. He hung out with the cursed people that were pushed to the outskirts of the town, the lonely people and the crippled people. Jesus called these people friends. And thankfully, he calls you and I friends too. What a motley bunch of friends, eh? Imagine them all hanging out at a dinner party. I think it would have been an amazing place to be. There's a story that we can find in the Bible where Jesus shows just what sort of amazing friend he is. And it's a story to one of his friends called Judas. And again, he just got all his disciples together and he'd sort of just brought them to this quiet place in Gethsemane. And he said, hey guys, come hang with me for a little bit. I really need to spend some time praying to my Father and just want to spend some time just with us because there's a lot going on, okay? And we can pick it up in Matthew 26, 47 to 50. It says this. So while he was still speaking, this is Jesus, he was still speaking to his disciples, Judas, one of the 12 disciples arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer, who is Judas, had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man, arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, and he kissed him. That wouldn't seem out of place. The other disciples were probably thinking, hey, where have you been? You're a bit late to the party, but that's cool. Come join us. But Jesus knew exactly what was going on. After all, he knows everything, right? And he knew this is what his friend had just done. And this is how he responds. Do what you came for, friend. do what you came for, friend. This is such a crazy response. We would let Jesus, we would validate him if he said, get out of here, and he struck a lightning bolt down on Judas right then and there. That would seem justified for what he just done. Judas was one of his friends who had traveled with him for a few years now, doing ministry with him, serving with him. He got to know him personally. He called him a friend, as we see, and Judas had just betrayed him. I feel like at that moment, if Jesus said this, do what you came for, friend, I feel like Judas would have had just this weight of guilt come down on him, like, oh man, what have I just done? But what was Jesus thinking to respond in such a kind way? The fact that he could have just given him the cold shoulder even if he didn't want to strike him down with lightning, something, right? But he calls him friend. And I think that this little interaction just shows us exactly the kind of character that Jesus has. This character of being a friend to all, even when we think they deserve it or not, which includes us sometimes too. There's a quote that says this. It says, religion says, I messed up, my dad is going to kill me. Versus, if you're a Jesus follower, it says, I messed up, I need to call my dad. I feel like this is the kind of relationship that we can often have with Jesus. We either have him as the kind of guy that when we mess up, we think, he doesn't want to know us anymore. I know I get tricked into that. You think, man, I've made a mistake. I've done it again. I've already asked God for forgiveness on that. Now I've embarrassed myself again. I don't even want to pray to God because he knows what's going on in my heart. And I've messed up. He's going to kill me, right? But actually, he's the kind of father that we can go to and say, I've messed up. I need to call my dad. I need to call him for help. I need to turn to him, not run from him. You see, Jesus' compassion is so much greater than our imperfections. He's not asking us just to come along and follow a whole bunch of rules and act a certain way, and then we can have friendship with him. What I like about a friendship with Jesus, and we see it with Judas, is that relationship comes first. The more time we get to spend with God, relationship comes first and the change comes later. Change doesn't come later because it's forced on by God, but it's just actually the more time you spend with him, like you do with any friends, you'll realize that actually I want to be like him. I love the way he cares about me. I love the way he sees people. I want to be like that too. I feel like when we welcome Jesus to be our friend, we actually become the best versions of ourselves just from having that one friendship. We can see an example of this ultimate friendship that Jesus offers us, and it's found in John 15:12, and this is what it says. My command is this. So again, he's talking to his disciples, and the crazy thing about this is actually just before the betrayal, okay? So we're going back in time. He's got his disciples together. It's a few days before Judas betrays him. And he's actually about to be killed on the cross. He knows this himself. So he's giving his disciples, his closest friends, a bunch of instructions and missions. And they're a little bit nervous because he says he's going to leave them. But this is one of the instructions he gives them, okay? He says, my command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friend. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know the master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I have learned from my Father I have made known to you. This is a picture of ultimate friendship. He says, greater love than this, to lay down your life for a friend. We know Jesus physically did that. He laid down and gave up his life physically, actually for us. But he asks us to go and do the same when he says, love as I have loved you. And for us, it looks different to give our life up for someone else. It's not necessarily physically dying, and thankfully for that, but it's this. It's small things like when you choose to spend time with someone who needs it, even if you're busy, and when you befriend the lonely, the ashamed, the dysfunctional family member that everyone else just laughs at or avoids, when you befriend the poor or the bullies in the workplace, at your school, at your uni. You befriend the vulnerable, the refugees in our community, the homeless, those with disabilities, or you actually just go and befriend people who are totally different to you. In this passage, Jesus was actually empowering his disciples. It was one of his final instructions to them, and he was basically just saying, hey, I've equipped you. I've told you everything I need to know. That's why I call you friends. It wasn't like you just follow me, but I've given you the secret sauce. This is what you need to do. I've equipped you. I've led by example even, not even just told you what to do. I've even showed you what to do, and now you guys can do it. Go for it. It's your turn. And he actually asks us the exact same question all this time, years later, to go and be a friend like Jesus. So I thought, how am I going to illustrate to you guys how exactly a friend like Jesus looks, especially in a world where friendship is as fragile as candy floss? And so I thought, why not actually show some candy floss? So who likes candy floss here? Yes, right. It's amazing because it seems like nothing, but unfortunately our friendships are the same. And the reason it's the same is because it's sweet, right? Friendships can be sweet. It looks great. It's enjoyable, but it can be so fleeting, like it's there 1 minute and gone the next. Does anyone experience that with candy floss? You put it in your mouth and next thing it dissolves. Our friendships can dissolve so quickly like that as well. That's how fragile the friendships in today's world have got, especially because they're based on things just like social media or technology, and it might be just that you posted the wrong thing on social media and now you're blocked from that friend, or you accidentally offended someone by just sharing your own personal opinion and now they've ghosted you or avoided you. And it was sweet to start with, but it just didn't last. It's as fragile as candy floss. Can anyone relate to those friends? Right? And that's what we're dealing with out there. But then, thankfully, there's also friendships like Jesus' friendship to Judas and to us that is as solid as a gobstopper. Who liked these growing up? Right? This is not the biggest one that is out there, but this is the biggest one we could find. What do we know about gobstoppers, right? We know that they last. So this is the kind of friendship God asks us to have, and this is the kind of friendship he extends to us. It's a friendship that is hard, it's rock solid, that not much can break it at all, and it lasts, and it goes on. And the more you get into it and enjoy that friendship, the stickier and the messier it becomes, but it's still great, right? This is the kind of friendship Jesus wants, and it's real and it's honest. So it is messy, but it lasts and it lasts and it lasts. And it doesn't matter if you get a bit of their mess on you because you're in it together and it's an enjoyable experience. And this is the kind of friendship we want to have with God that he's extending to us, but he's also asking us to extend to other people. A gobstopper friendship is the kind of friendship like this. It's when you can pick up the phone and you can call somebody and just and offload everything on your chest, no matter the time that's passed between your last conversations. It's the person that gives you the grace and truth in your life, even though it might hurt and it's not exactly what you want to hear, but they give you that truth because they care about you as a person. It's the kind of friends who just turn up consistently, even when other people fade away. It's the kind of friends who bring you food when you're sick or going through a rough time, who step into the gap for you without even having to be asked, just because they see a need, because they're present in your life to be able to see it. They are the friends that go through the surface, laugh and the banter, but then they're also the friends that stop and then say, but how are you doing, really? A gobstopper friend is the friend that may have different values to you, different beliefs to you, but they still see you as you, and they still offer you friendship. I admire all those kind of friends in my life and respect them hugely because they're hard to come by, as we know. There's so many candy floss friends out there. But maybe you think, well, that sounds great. A gobstopper's friend is the ultimate. But currently in my life, I have no gobstopper friends. I only have candy floss friends, so it's not really relevant for me. But actually, it is relevant for you because Jesus is offering that friendship to you. And like he said to his disciples with that final instruction, it doesn't eliminate you just because you're not receiving that kind of friendship. He's still challenging you to go out, regardless of your current season of friendship, and be a gobstopper friend to others just because Jesus is that friend to you. I was reading a book the other day, and it was called Dirty Faith, and this is what it says. It says, being a friend like Jesus doesn't begin with our feet, it begins with our eyes. And this seemed kind of confusing to me because we're always told to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and we are, but first of all, before we can even be the hands and feet of Jesus, we need to have the eyes that Jesus has to see people the way he sees them. I love that because I think it can be so hard to actually know where to even start on a friendship, especially when Jesus is saying to lay down your life for a friend. You might be thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? But if you see people with the same love and compassion that Jesus has, if you accept them, then that is exactly it. It can be as simple as turning up consistently for someone who needs it, for smiling and greeting someone new that you meet or sit next to on the bus or at work. It can be as simple as introducing yourself to somebody or asking someone how their week was. And actually, this is the next part, stop and listen to the answer. And it's also as simple as inviting someone for a meal, whether it be at your house or out. This is the kind of friendship Jesus was challenging his disciples to go and live out, and he challenges us with the same thing. So I want to close with sharing two stories with you. And the first story is going to be about the kind of friend that we can be. So look out for that and think how you can be. And the second story is about the kind of friend that Jesus can be to us. So I've got stories of two of my friends, right? And this is an example where I got to experience having gobstopper friends invest in my life. So I have a little 2-year-old Harper. You've probably seen her running around. But when she was 6 weeks old, I was having a rubbish time. And I'm sure new mums know this experience and new parents. So I was tired. I had no idea what I was doing. There's no instruction manual they send home from the hospital. I was tired, still recovering. And then on top of it all, I got sick. And I had this horrible flu. I was really sick. And thankfully, one of my friends, I didn't even tell her what was going on, but she knocked on my door that morning, and she was holding this whole bag of home-cooked meals, like to last me a long time as well. And I answered the door, and I saw it was her, and I was in my pajamas. I had bags under my eyes. I hadn't showered. I kind of smelled a bit like that baby sick-up smell. It became my new perfume for a while, and I saw her, and I burst into tears. I told her what was going on. She didn't even know. She was just coming to bring some food because she's a mum, and she knew how it was. And she came in, and she held my baby for me while I could shower, which was a huge success for the day, and also then gave me food, and I got to have my cup of tea while it was hot. This is a huge win for mums. The next friend that I got to experience of being a gobstopper friend for me, these are simple things, guys. Last year, I went through a really hard time. I was experiencing a rubbish loss, and I told my friend about it, who lives in New Plymouth, and she has 5 kids of her own, right? And she left 4 kids behind, put her 6-month-old baby in the car, and drove all the way to Auckland, which took a long time, having to stop for feeds, nappy changes. She took a whole week off, friends. She arrived with a carload of frozen meals for me and just stayed and sat with me for a whole week. And the reason I'm sharing this is not because I'm something great to deserve that, but because of how great they are to be able to put it in action, right? Exactly what Jesus asks. I think it's just showing up and not having the answers. For me, this is what it looks like to be a friend that Jesus requires. And there's a quote that Bob Goff says, and he says this. He's an author and a speaker, and he says, I used to want to fix people, but now I just want to be with them. And this is the thing I love, that being the kind of friend Jesus requires us to be, and the kind of friend he is to us. He doesn't just come along and say, okay, I'll fix this, this, and this about you, then we'll become friends. Jesus actually just comes along, he just extends friendship, sits with us, spends time with us, and as a result, we can't help but change. The second story I want to share with you is a story about a hymn. So I had the privilege of growing up in a really cool church with my whole family, and one of the things we did at the church I grew up in was sing hymns. Anyone else sing hymns growing up? Yeah. And I think that even if you've never been to church before, if today's your first time even coming into a church, you will probably still know hymns because that's how powerful they became, right? They were influential. There's famous hymns that we sing in all kinds of situations. But one of these hymns that we used to sing, and it can stick in my head, is "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." And this song I absolutely love because if you read the lyrics, you can really relate and see yourself in it. But I want to share with you the story behind how that hymn came to be. So first of all, the word hymn is short for a Greek word, which is basically saying it's a song of praise. It was somebody's like poem or journal entry praising God. So this was written by Joseph Scriven in the 1800s, and he lived in Ireland, okay? And he was in love with his childhood sweetheart, and everyone knew they were going to end up together. And the day before their wedding, they both rode their horses to come and meet to where the wedding would be. And his fiancée, wife-to-be, was riding her horse, and unfortunately her horse spooked. It bucked her off. She hit her head on a rock and actually ended up dying, and only hours later he found her. As you can imagine, he was absolutely heartbroken. Like, how would you feel? And so he was so distraught that he was like, I can't even live here anymore, being surrounded by all the memories of her and the places we were going to be. So he moves to Canada. And when he arrives in Canada, he thankfully meets Jesus and has this encounter with him and has such a love and passion for Jesus that he's just found that he decides he's going to devote his whole life to a scripture found in the Bible that's referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. And he decides he's going to live out his life in a way he commits to a vow of poverty. He says, hey, I'm only going to do labor for people who really need it, but for the people who can't actually afford to pay me. So he got this nickname called the Good Samaritan in the area. And after a few years of doing this kind of work and just committing his whole life to serving God, he meets another lady called Elisha Roche. And they fall in love, and they're soon engaged and getting ready to be married as well. And just 2 weeks before they get married, she gets sick with pneumonia and actually dies as well. This guy has just experienced heartbreak twice, losing the love of his life. Like, things were just looking terrible for him. But he continued serving God the way he faithfully did. And then a few years after that, he gets a letter that his mother back in Ireland is actually dying. But because he's given a vow of poverty and been working for people for free, he actually can't afford to get back there anymore. So what he decides to do is write her a poem and write her some encouragement in a letter and send it to her. And a friend found that letter years later, and it's what we now know as the song, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. Feel the power of these words. I'm going to read some to you. And knowing the background of what's happened behind this is the kind of relationship and friendship Joseph had that he could still write these words. He says, can we find a friend so faithful who in all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. What a friend we have in Jesus. How could he write such powerful words after experiencing such heartbreak? Being a friend with Jesus doesn't mean that he actually takes away all of the bad things in our life and life's going to be great from here on out. But it does mean that he will stand by you through it all. He will give you the strength to be able to get through it. He will carry your burdens for you when you get too weighed down. He'll be consistent. Even if we feel like we don't deserve it, he still offers that kind of friendship to us. How stupid do you think it would have been for me to answer the door to my two friends and realized, it's them, and then shut the door and then text them and said, come back in 2 days because I'm a mess right now. I'm in my pajamas. My hair's not done. I've got bags under my eyes. The house is chaos. I smell like spew and I haven't got the groceries yet. So come back later when I've cleaned it all up, when I've pulled myself together, when I've ordered my click and collect and I can host you and pretend everything's fine. That would be stupid, right? What's the point of friendship? Unfortunately, though, some of us see Jesus this way. He's at the door of our lives, continually knocking. He's continually giving you that nudge. He's continually putting you in those situations where you can have conversations about him and you can meet him and you're getting pushed and that little nudge is there and your faith is starting to grow, but you shut the door on Jesus and you say, nah, I'm not letting him in till I'm perfect. I'm not letting him in till I'm cleaned up. I'm not letting him in till I'm good enough or I've sorted out that situation or I've made amends to all of my messes. I don't want him to see me like this. You wouldn't turn down a friend offering you help and support and encouragement when you need it. So why would you do that to a person who can help you so much more than any human relationship can? The amazing thing about Jesus' friendship that he's extending to us is that it's not based on performance. It's not based on you earning anything to receive that gift of friendship, just like Judas. He did that right then and there. Jesus still responded to him in that very moment without missing a beat. Do what you came to do, friend. He just desires real relationship with us. He doesn't desire perfection at all. So wherever that lie came from, you need to get rid of it. I don't know where you find yourself today or how you would answer that question of who do you say I am, or what your picture of Jesus even is. But I know that these few things are true. That Jesus was and is the ultimate friend. He loves you personally, he cares about you, and he knows you by name. He knows your situation, and he still offers friendship. Secondly, as a church community, I know that this place could change completely if every single one of us started being a gobstopper friend because of the relationship we have with Jesus. And if we just got rid of the candy floss friendships and we were a community that was on fire for God, loving people and offering friendship that nobody has seen before, that when we got together, people thought, what a motley crew, something's going on there. And if you forget everything else, just remember, be a gobstopper. They last, they're rock solid, they're messy, but they're great. Before we finish, I just want us to be able to stand and sing the lyrics of the song that Joseph wrote, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And if you don't want to sing, just read those words and ask yourself the question, what kind of friendship do I currently have with Jesus? Where am I on the scale of he's made up or he was my personal savior? And how would I answer that question? Who do you say I am? Let's stand.